I would really like to share this experience with you guys. I've never told anyone this before because when I talk about stuff like this, people look at me like I'm nuts, but I am not. A little backstory. My son died when he was 3 years old back in 2018. He had cancer and battled it all his life. Fast forward to 2020. I was living in a house with my mom and sister and her boyfriend. We were sitting in our garage one night, and all of a sudden we saw a light flickering on a shelf in the very back of the garage. My sister's boyfriend went to see what it was. The light was coming from one of my mom's old phones that had been sitting in that spot for 2 years. It was all busted up and had never been charged in those 2 years. My sister's boyfriend picked it up and it stopped blinking. We tried to turn it on, but it was dead. We didn't think anything of it at first and sat it down on one of my son's Mickey Mouse coloring books. As soon as that phone touched his coloring book, it started flashing again. He picked it up and it stopped flashing. He set it down again on the coloring book and again it started flashing. At this point, I was calling out to my son to see if it was him. I was asking him to give me a sign if it was him, and then the phone turned on. There was a random jumble of letters and numbers on the screen, but right there amongst the jumbled letters and numbers it said Mickey Mouse. At that point, I knew it was him. I cried hysterically. We all did. We went inside with the phone and showed my mom and told her what happened, and she couldn't believe it. The phone stopped flashing, and I held it for a few hours to see if it would do it again. We were all about to go to bed, so my sister stood up and turned off the living room light. I set the phone down on our fireplace in the living room by a little cross and Bible. We were all about to go to our rooms when the light on the phone came on again. The light on the phone was pointed directly at the cross and cast a big shadow on the cross. The shadow of the cross covered one of our entire living room walls. All of our mouths dropped wide open. We all knew he was showing us a sign that he was okay. We all prayed together and talked to him that night. After that, the phone never turned on again, never flashed a light again either. I tried to charge it the next day, and it never turned on. This is one of many experiences we've had since he died. It just lets me know there is more out there than we will ever be able to understand. Comment. I've had an odd experience with my phone as well, although not as vivid as yours. Mine could be nothing, maybe just a bug on my phone, but it makes me wonder. My dad passed away when I was 16, and when I was 17, I would drive while listening to books. I couldn't afford to buy audiobooks, so I would just download PDFs of books and have a text-to-speech app read them out to me, similar to how blind people would use a phone. I was heavily grieving, and most of the books I would listen to were themed around spirituality, so I was generally thinking about him while driving. One time, while I was driving home around 10 p.m., my book was interrupted, and the text-to-speech voice kept repeating, "Hello, Samantha. Hello, Samantha. Hello, Samantha," my name, at least a dozen times. I listened in befuddlement. It wasn't stopping. It freaked me out so much that I turned off my phone. I wonder if it was my dad trying to reach out to me. I was a very skeptical person at the time, trying desperately to believe that his soul was still alive by researching spirituality. Maybe that was him telling me, "Hello, I'm here. Stop worrying." Thanks for sharing your experience. It brings me comfort to know others have had paranormal experiences surrounding technology. I hope my experience can bring you comfort too, and I am sorry for your loss. Twice in my life, I've used a Ouija board. The first time I did it, it didn't seem to work all that well. The board was a bit dodgy, and there was one person in the group who I was certain was moving the glass for theatrics. I couldn't prove it, but I had my doubts. The answers to the questions were sketchy at best, and not all of them made sense. The one thing that maybe might have proved it was real was that I remember for weeks after we did it, our cat at the time would sit just outside the doorway and stare right in the direction of where we had set it up. We all noted that it was kind of weird, as he'd never done that before, but he eventually stopped and we forgot about it and moved on. Perhaps we did make a connection and our setup was just wrong or our etiquette was off. Either way, I remained largely unconvinced that we had actually contacted spirits. The second time, though, was an entirely different outcome. A few years later, and I'd moved across country to attend university. One day, me and some of my uni friends got on the topic of Ouija and decided we'd have a crack at it one night. But this time, we'd do it properly. One of my friends was quite an esoteric sort of guy, and he did some research on how to properly do it. None of the others besides me had tried Ouija at this point, so we were mostly going in blind. But my friend made us a proper board set up and even used a sage smudging stick to cleanse the room of bad energies, as he put it. Once that was done, the four of us sat down and got to it. I will mention here that I was still very skeptical, so I went in with the mindset of carefully observing the other guys to see if they were messing with the glass at all, but throughout the entire session, the movement was so fluid and precise that all my doubts quickly evaporated, and I was genuinely astounded that there was a supernatural entity interacting with us throughout this entire session. But that wasn't the only reason I started believing. The conversation we had with the spirit was so clear and yet so bizarre that I'll remember it forever. One thing my esoteric friend said was paramount to the experience was courtesy, so we started off basically asking if there were any spirits available to speak to us, and when we got a yes, we introduced ourselves and asked if it wouldn't mind speaking to us for a bit. Another yes. We apologized for intruding and made it clear that the spirit did not have to answer any questions it didn't want to, and then we began our questioning in earnest. I won't type out a transcript, but here's the basics. The spirit we were speaking to was a soldier killed in 1984, and he was from Yemen. He quite enjoyed the afterlife, or wherever he was at the time. He made it very clear to us that death was not the end, and there was nothing for us to fear in the afterlife. He said the concept of heaven and hell were untrue. He also said reincarnation was possible. I then remember asking if it was a Buddhist style of reincarnation, to which we received a yes/no. I interpreted that as a sort of. After all this, we then decided amongst ourselves to wrap things up, having already had our minds blown away by what we just experienced. We said thanks to the spirit and wished it all the best. We also waited for the spirit to say goodbye to us. This was an important part, according to my friend, as it would allow the spirit to return to its own realm easily. That was it. I walked out of that room with a strange feeling of bewilderment and yet also enormous relief. If what the spirit said was true, and I had no reason to believe it was lying to us intentionally, then death was almost something to look forward to. I considered myself a pure atheist up until this point, but this one night rattled that belief so hard that I no longer consider myself as such, and will always have the memory of my Yemeni friend to prove otherwise. Thanks for reading. If anyone has any questions about my experience, feel free to ask away. I'm more than happy to answer them in the comments. I was over at my in-laws' apartment one night. Me, my wife, father-in-law, and brother-in-law were watching TV in the living room. My mother-in-law was in her bedroom sleeping. In the middle of the apartment, there is a door that divides the kitchen, bathroom, and 2 rooms from the dining room, living room, and another bedroom. Since we were watching a soccer game, we shut the middle door so my mother-in-law wouldn't get disturbed by the sound. I was sitting with my wife on a sofa, facing the door to the other side of the apartment. My brother-in-law and father-in-law were sitting on a sofa facing the TV with the door in mention to their right. Out of nowhere, we hear steps to the door, and it opens a bit, and that's when I see a hand on the door and a shadow peeking behind it. When it happened, everyone immediately turned towards the door and saw it, not just me. I immediately went to go check it out, followed by my father-in-law and brother-in-law. My mother-in-law was in her bed snoring, and no one was in the house. I literally ran over right away. No one could have had time to leave it that quickly, and I heard no sounds of anyone leaving. 4 people saw someone by the door. A big wooden door opened by itself with no drafts or anything in the apartment. All doors and windows to outside were locked. When I ran over, I wasn't even thinking paranormal, but more of a break-in because it was a kind of rough part of the city. I was pretty shook when I didn't find anyone even outside and all the fences were still locked. My mother-in-law doesn't sleepwalk and would not have had time to go back to her bed by the time I got over there. Me and my wife ended up living in another apartment at the same building for a few years and never saw or heard anything. None of us could ever come up with a good explanation for what happened. No place for an adult to hide in this apartment, no hidden crawl space or tunnel for a squatter. Later that year, cameras were added to inside and outside of the building, and we never saw anyone that shouldn't be there. Hi, everyone. I'm a nursing student, female, 25, Italian, and during my residency, I've had the same odd and creepy experience more than I would have liked to have had. I don't know if it's a normal thing or if some of you might have a scientifically accurate explanation or a medical one, but a lot of the patients I take care of, especially the elders, talk about seeing their dead relatives, for example, parents or siblings or dead lovers and or unknown kids beside their beds. This can happen during both day and night at any given time. What's so strange is that in maximum 1 to 2 weeks after the apparitions, this patient passes away. I tried talking about this with my teacher and asked for some explanation, but all she said is that those are their relatives comforting and preparing them for death. The children are considered benevolent spirits who serve the same purpose. I'm a bit of a medium, or a psychic, if you want to say, and always have an eerie feeling when this happens. I can actually feel or see ghosts. It depends on their energy levels and their will to be seen, but I always fail to share the same visions as my patients. Has anyone experienced this kind of thing or have a possible explanation? This isn't perfectly how it went because it was 2 years ago, and I'm only going back to this because I saw someone had the same experience. Just a little background. 3 years ago, my friend I knew since birth was diagnosed with leukemia, and after an intense and scary year-long battle, the cancer won. I'm tearing up just writing this. I miss him so much. So I was eating some food in the dream, and my friend rang the doorbell. He had his hair nice, and he looked so good, and he looked happy, and said, "I had a life I was going to live, and I couldn't live it. I want you to live a life and enjoy it." He smiled a bit and shrugged and said, "Hey, it'll be okay without me. I'll miss you too up there, but don't worry about me. The pain is gone." He went in for a hug, and we hugged for what felt like an eternity. "I love you, man," he said, as his parents' car door opened, and I yelled, "Mark, don't leave me, live, asshole." He just looked at me and laughed and said, "Sorry, man, I gotta go." And I screamed and screamed, "Don't leave me, don't leave me." But he got in, and the car drove into the street, which was a bright blue light, his favorite color, and the second the car got engulfed, I woke up crying and screaming, just as my mom got home, walking in, crying, and said, Mark died, and I just said, crying, I know. And I cried for the day, but it felt better being able to say goodbye. God, I miss him. Four times, that's how many times I've seen him. However, I only trust my ability to recount two of them. The reason is I was young when all of them happened. Often I'd be playing with some toys on the ground, and I'd turn to the doorway and see him standing there. You can see how terrified I was because normally it was daytime and the lights were on. It was like staring at a void. To keep this post short and concise, I will recount the one unique experience, the very last time I saw a shadow entity. Ironically, the last time I saw a shadow person, it was a different one than I was used to. The man in the doorway in previous times felt distinctly masculine, like he was an observer. I truly believe he didn't mean to harm me, but that doesn't mean I wasn't spooked. The last time, the one I will never forget, was different. It was a woman, and it moved. He never moved. He stood there and then vanished. I was in grade 5, and I was getting ready for bed. My mom and dad were getting my younger siblings ready as well, making sure they were dressed and had their teeth brushed. Our house was huge, and it was very open. I was brushing my teeth in my upstairs bathroom when I remembered that I had to take a melatonin. So I went downstairs, and because of the landing between the third and second floor, I could still hear my parents and the kids. The kids' bathroom lights were illuminating part of the living room. I was in the kitchen after descending the stairs, and I took the small white pills. The parents' bedroom was next to the stairs, so I had to walk past it. As I approached the stairs, something caught my eye. Someone was sitting on the bed. My parents' bedroom had a feature where you could dim the lights, and they were on the dimmest setting. I saw the shadowy figure sitting with crossed legs on the bed. It seemed to be shifting a little. I thought it was my mom. Again, I said it felt female, and I almost went in to hug her goodnight. That was until I heard my mom's voice from upstairs. My heart froze and my blood ran cold. The thing sitting on the bed staring at me wasn't Mom, or Dad, 'cause he was upstairs too. I knew it was a shadow person at this point, but it felt wrong. It wasn't the safe observer, it was more like a malicious void. I blinked and looked away and looked back, but it was still there. After that, my body resumed and I ran upstairs. I haven't seen a shadow person since, and I am torn between wanting to and not wanting to. It makes me wonder who the female was. I haven't even given her a name. The male figure is the shadow man, but giving the female a proper name seems like it would give it power. Who are these people? What do they want? Where do they come from? The title sort of explains it. I had a ghost haunting me. He wasn't tormenting me or anything, but I splashed him with holy water and he faded away. I got lonely and brought him back. Let me tell you, that's not a good idea. 0 out of 10 do not recommend. I was sitting on my bed reading when suddenly everything got really cold. I could see my own breath in front of my face. Then a blinding light went through all my windows as if someone's parked car shined their headlights into all my windows, and there was a subtle shaking. The ground wasn't shaking, just unsecured items like stuff on my dresser and desk. The shaking and lights went for a few seconds and then stopped. It stayed cold, though. And just when I got control of my breathing and started to get up, the shaking and lights started again, and I dropped to my knees, and I'm almost certain I saw someone walk past my bedroom door. The shaking, lights, and even the temperature went back to normal. I made my way back downstairs to find all my furniture ripped up as if a large cat had been let loose, and chairs were tipped over. I ran out of my house and got in my car, and as I drove away, my bedroom lights turned on, and I could see the silhouette of a man standing in the window. I'm now at my friend's apartment writing this. I'm almost certain that it's the ghost who's pissed that I splashed him with holy water. I'm too scared to go back to my house, and I made up an excuse for my friend because I doubt she'll believe me. I'm going to need to go back at some point to at least cleanse the house, but until then, I'm hiding from him. This has been happening the last couple nights. I've had sleep paralysis before where I see demons in my room, but this is totally different. The demons never talked. They went away when I showed them my rosary as well. This time I could feel it coming from the bottom of the bed like swishing up, and I could feel her holding me from the back like spooning, I guess. Then she would talk to me very quietly so I could barely understand what she was saying, and I would respond to her best I could. This happened maybe 3 times last night. Curious if it was sleep paralysis or possibly a spirit. My house was built in 2003, so there were only one set of people living here before me, and nobody died in the house. I was awake when this was happening, obviously, because I was able to verbally answer her. But this was very positive and very loving. I'm just scared that it could be something that is bad trying to trick me. Any ideas or anything is very appreciated. I'm trying to look this up on the internet and not getting much help. Also, I believe it left a scent on my clothing because I don't recognize it from anything I put on. It is a sweet scent, something like a woman would wear. I can't tell if it's playing with me. I cleaned a lot of clutter from my home. I have posted before, but now it seems like a cruel prank. A bit of a backstory. I live alone with my dog and cat in a haunted apartment. I'm 22 and not a big person. I'm small and thin, but I got some muscle and can handle my own. I came home about 2 weeks ago, and my bedroom door was wide open and banging against the wall. My dog was cowering in his cage with my cat under his front legs. So I did what any idiot with no brain would do, and I went to check it out. The comforter on my bed had been pulled back, and the drawers of my dresser were pulled out. I thought someone had broken in at first, but the fact that the door was still banging on the wall when I walked in made me believe whatever it was had still been in my apartment. Now I have to say I have a sliding glass door that connects my ground floor patio to my bedroom, but it lets out a horrible screech when it does open, so I knew it wasn't used. I was standing in the doorway of my bedroom, and I'm staring at the mess, and it was horrible, like someone ransacked my bedroom. I was about to call the police when all of a sudden the dresser drawers were all pushed back in at once. Then last night, my dog had woken me up by kicking me in the stomach, but my closet door opened right in front of me and the light turned on. At first I thought I was dreaming, but whatever it was made my dog growl, and then the light turned off, but the door stayed open. I also have 2 paintings hanging over my bedside tables, and last night the painting closest to me started to just teeter side to side. It's something my cat likes to do, but my cat was curled up against my stomach under the blanket. I had the TV on, so I wasn't in the dark, plus the kitchen light on with the door open, but I had laid there completely still for a little until it stopped, and I finally went back to sleep. I woke up this morning, and the door is almost completely closed. There's a tiny crack separating the folding door from the door frame, and now the Harley-Davidson big leather jacket in my closet has the sleeve pulled through the crack in the door. I went on leave for 10 days and just got back on the 8th of this month, but while I was cleaning the clutter away on the 9th, I had found this gag gift I bought my buddy. It's a Hasbro Ouija board. I've never used it. I got it for my buddy as a joke to scare him, and it showed back up at my door a day later. Him and I laughed about it, and I didn't have the receipt to return it to Barnes & Noble, so I kept it. At first on my bookshelf, now it's in the hall closet, but I was cleaning off the breakfast bar, so if you and me were standing next to each other and both turned our heads to the right, we could stare into the hall closet. I heard what sounded like footsteps, and all of a sudden the Ouija board fell off of the cat carrier in the closet, and the box all slid all the way until about a foot in front of me. The box was still by the closet door, and the actual board and planchette were the ones closest to me, like it wanted me to play with it. I remember blinking at it for a few minutes, just watching it on the ground. Both of my pets were on the couch behind me staring at it also. I had felt a cold breeze on the back of my neck, and something touched my back. It felt like a hand, like it was pushing me towards the board, but I didn't do anything of the sort. I grabbed some leftover sage I had and cleansed the board before picking it up and putting it back in the box and shoving it back to its place in the closet. For the last few days, each time I open the closet door, the lid of the box is off and the board is on the floor. My pets can't open this door. Hello, all. I've been lurking this sub for some years now, and have had a couple of experiences myself, but not for the best part of a decade. This feels a bit ridiculous, but I suppose I'm still processing it somewhat. Anyway, this was only about 14 hours ago last night. I was pretty pooped after work, so I had a solid nap. The blinds in the room were half open, revealing the bottom panel of the window. Outside was dark. Sometimes my partner will lock himself out, having a cigarette, and knock on the window for me to let him back in. He will also knock just to annoy me. I wake up to a few familiar knocks on the window. Being groggy, I ignore them until I hear the same pattern of knocking again. I sat up and glanced at the window panel, which looks outside. Framed by the window, I could see my boyfriend's slightly blurry and slightly sepia tone, like it was through an older TV screen, face, smiling at me through the glass. I took that as him being locked out, given he said he'd go to the shop for me, so I smiled back and went to open the door. But holy shit, there was no one at the door. The walkway was empty and dark. I shut the door, having realized boyfriend had returned from the shop before and had been in the living room the entire time. The natural response was to close the blinds and get back into bed. When I fell back asleep, I had awful nightmares of hurting and abusing my partner. Sorry for banging on, I just feel very confused by this all. I was definitely awake when I saw that, and I know what I saw. Above all, it felt so intrusive and jarring, and I'm worried I've let something into my flat. I'm not sure what I'm asking for here, some sense of solidarity, acknowledgement, an explanation. When I was about 4 to 5 years old, I recall at nights I'd often wake up in bed to find an elderly woman lying down next to me. I remember not feeling afraid of her, but instead confused. It was definitely not sleep paralysis, as I could still move around, but I did feel like I was in a trance. The elderly woman had wrinkly arms that I could feel and a wedding ring that felt cold to the touch. She also had white hair, but I don't recall seeing her face as she was lying on her side next to me. It was like she was a real person lying there, and I felt like she was trying to protect me in some way. I never cried out for help or told anyone about it the next morning. I assumed she was just someone who felt familiar paying me a visit. Eventually, her visits stopped as I got older. I do wonder what kind of entity she was, but it didn't seem sinister. Hello, my Vickies. Thanks for listening. If you like what you heard and you haven't subscribed already, please do, and hit the like button, as they're both very helpful to my growth here on YouTube, and I'm trying to grow. If you have a suggestion or simply want to say hello, please leave a comment. I love to hear from you guys. I post every Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday by 5 p.m. Pacific. If you have a story of your own you'd like to share and possibly have read on the channel, send it to me at veronica45stories@gmail.com. Link is also in the description, as are other ways to support the channel if you feel so inclined. Thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it more than I can say. And until next time, be good.